All right, guys, we are excited today, man. We are joined by an awesome guest. He is the editor-in-chief at FanDuel and Numbers Fire. He has his own podcast called the Late Round Podcast. He is the man, the myth, the legend, JJ Zarkeesian. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, man?
I said Zarkeesian, didn't I? I just said I would say Zarkeesian. Zachariason.
Yeah, there you go. You're good. Like I
Good
told
talk.
you though, like I told you before the show though, no matter how people say it, it doesn't matter to me at this point in my life.
I'm the worst. No, so I figured we would just talk about Pittsburgh since we're both Pittsburgh guys and not talk about fantasy. I'm sure the people would really love that if we talk about
Yeah,
like the Strip District and A
yeah,
La Familia and stuff
yeah.
like that.
Fries on everything, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I'm down to talk about that for a half hour.
No, so yeah, we're you probably went to high school about 45 minutes away from me. So it's really cool to see somebody local from the Pittsburgh area blow up like the way you did. So congratulations, man. You deserve it.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I always, I don't live there anymore. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina now, but always miss Pittsburgh. My in-laws still live up there, so I get to go up there a little bit still, and I always, it holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah, once if you grew up in Pittsburgh, you're kind of always a Pittsburgher.
Yeah, definitely a Yinzer for life. Went to Pitt. So I was there from my whole life until I was 22 when I graduated. So definitely, I miss it all the time. I'm glad where I'm at, but I definitely, have some urges sometimes to move back.
Sure, sure. So I'm gonna start here. So we did a mailbag, but this is something that I'm like, I don't know, it drives me crazy in fantasy football. So I'm a huge Bill Simmons fan. He's like my guy, man. That's the guy I always listen to. He's the reason I kind of got into podcasting. So he also believes this. I hate snake order drafts in fantasy. I'm an auction guy through and through. Do you have a preference on that?
Yeah, I like auction also. I actually just I have an auction episode coming out on Monday on the Late Round Podcast, and I actually just wrapped it up editing it, so it'll be ready for Monday morning. But yeah, I mean, I think that the main reason is because number one, you can get whoever you want. Obviously, you're not handcuffed to like certain areas of drafts, and people only think about the first round typically whenever you think that way, where they're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get Christian McCaffrey if I'm in the 112 spot, right? But it really, I mean, the first like 3 rounds, you have like a smaller consideration set in general, 3 or 4 rounds. It's not just the first round; so the whole draft sort of plays out. You're not going to get some of these early third rounders where you're at in the late first round just because of the way that drafts typically play out. So I'm definitely an auction guy where the draft isn't linear. Snake drafts, they're totally linear where it's one pick to the next pick to the next pick to the next pick. Auction drafts, you just get who you want. And there's a lot more game theory involved, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. So we're doing a league for yards per fantasy. It's 20 teams and they're doing, I mean, we have to do a slow draft because we have so many people in it. So like, it's hard to do. You can't really do auction that way. Or
Yeah.
else it'd be really difficult. But I was like, man, we got to do auction. I hate snake orders so much.
Yeah, man. I'm with you.
So here's a question for you that we had in the mailbag is what is your ideal league? Is it one quarterback, two quarterbacks, super flex, 10 team, 20 team? Like what's your ideal league?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best leagues are the ones that make you think and make for a lot of strategies. And so, I think if you look at the traditional fantasy league, a lot of people are just going to be pounding running back and wide receiver early because you know that you can wait on the quarterback position. Maybe you'll throw a Kittle or a Kelsey early and maybe a Mark Andrews, but that's not going to drastically change the way that people approach drafts. Whereas, if you look at what happened with like the Scott Fish Bowl, you have people that are drafting literally any position at any time. I do think that, nothing against the Scott Fish Bowl scoring. I think it's really, really fun. I also want to keep in mind that the scoring, I prefer more predictable scoring than stuff like, like first downs are a little bit hard to project and stuff. It's not that it's not fun, but I want to get projectable scoring so that, the people who are drafting more precisely and doing a little bit more homework are rewarded for that a little bit. But generally speaking, I'm all about super flex leagues and I'm all about leagues that maybe change the general scoring, like tight end premium leagues where people then might reach for tight ends a little bit more than usual. I think that's very, very important so that the whole draft room isn't just drafting running backs and wide receivers early and often, where you just get a little bit more differentiation.
I like that. No, I'm fully with you. And kind of speaking the whole running back thing is I'm curious what your opinion on pros and cons of the zero running back strategy. Do you personally like it or use it?
So I do in some leagues. I really, it varies league to league. I'm very much a modified zero RB drafter. I have been for years, where I'll get one of the top guys in the first 2 rounds of my draft, and then I'll pound wide receiver for a little bit. Still usually go with a later round tight end, but sometimes I go with an earlier round tight end. And then just wait on quarterback. I mean, the main reason for it is I've done a study on this offseason in particular. I did a study on finding league winners in your fantasy draft and where league winners really come from. And basically, without getting into the details of like how I defined a league winner, et cetera, league winning running backs are easier to find in the middle rounds of your draft when you get past round 5. So opportunity costs, which is basically what you're missing out on when you take a player in your draft. Opportunity cost really levels out after about round 5 in draft. So after like pick 60 in a 12-team league. So with that in mind, once you get into round 6, round 7, etc., it's not a really that big of a deal as to, if your players are busting, and if it's, you're really looking for upside at that point in your draft. And what I found is at that point in the draft is when you're really finding more of the league winning running backs than wide receivers. Now, we do see overall sort of a flatter distribution in terms of points at the wide receiver position than we do the running back position, which plays into the idea of modified zero RB, which is, getting one of those running backs that is giving you that edge and hoping that guy hits, because oftentimes the running backs who are hitting at a great rate are coming in the first 2 rounds of drafts. So I'm locking in that player, hoping that player hits, and then I'm playing the market a little bit and saying, I know that these wide receivers that are really going to give me any sort of edge aren't being drafted later and in the middle rounds. They're being drafted in the first 5 rounds of drafts. So I'll load up there, depending on scoring settings, obviously. I'll load up there, and then I'll get my RB2 and just start throwing darts at my RB2 spot in those middle rounds.
No, and that's actually pretty interesting because you might have been on the show once. Have you ever been on the Dynasty podcast for the Ringer?
I don't think so, actually.
So, like I said, I'm a Bill Simmons guy, so the Ringer. But
Yeah.
they have their podcasting, and they were talking about how, generally speaking, if like Julio Jones goes down this year, you're not really going to see a receiver step up and take his full workload, right?
Right.
And if Zeke Elliott would go down, Tony Pollard could end up being a top 5 running back. So it's,
Right.
it's the idea, like you said, of going those later round running backs, those guys who are like either a heavy handcuff or lower end. But if they get the work, it's all about volume with running back, I should say. So
Yeah, it's a lot easier for those guys to step in and be productive. I think a lot of times the fantasy community overrates what a handcuff does and the odds of handcuffs hitting. I mean, realistically, over the last decade, we've seen like 2 handcuffs really, really hit, which was D'Angelo Williams back when Le'Veon Bell was banged up, and then Michael Bush back in the Darren McFadden days for Oakland. We really haven't seen these handcuffs like super pan out. And so I do think there's a little bit of an overstatement as to like the impact that these guys can have, but you can also get, small bursts of like 1 or 2 weeks. The way that I'm looking at that is the fact that like they didn't do it over a long stretch of time. But at the same time, handcuffs are usually like the first players that are dropped once the season starts. The teams that benefited from the Le'Veon Bell injury weren't even the teams that drafted D'Angelo Williams to begin with. There were guys who were getting him off the waiver wire. But yeah, I mean, that's part of it is the handcuff. It's really the anti-fragility aspect of things, where it's the handcuffs benefit from these injuries, and the teams who didn't invest in the running back position are the ones who are benefiting from the inevitable running back injuries that happen.
And I just think we're moving on to like a day and age where we don't run the ball a ton. And now like wide receivers are the big things. We're in a passing league. And I did a dynasty league about 3 years ago. We started it, and I went heavy on receivers. So I had like Tyreek Hill, Michael Thomas, and everyone's like, man, your running backs aren't good. I don't like your team. And like, you look at it now and I'm like, I think I'm doing all right. Cause I threw some darts, got a few guys, you know what I mean? So it ended up working out, but it's weird. And I feel like a lot of people are kind of hesitant to move on because everyone's in that handcuff mentality.
For sure.
So here's a question that we had is, with Hopkins gone from Houston, also leaving as his 31% of his targets, who do you think benefits the most?
Yeah, I have, and I think that the idea of vacated targets is a little bit misleading. And the main reason for that is I'm a firm believer that targets are a skill statistic. They're earned, right? In order to get a target, you need to get open. I think a lot of people look at targets as sort of like there's a lack of competition in an offense and a guy being targeted as a result of that. But it's really, you have to get open, and elite wide receivers generally always see, a 25% ish target share in their offense, no matter what their competition is. So if you're a second tier wide receiver and then there's an elite wide receiver added to your offense, that could hurt your target share. But if you were already an elite wide receiver, you're likely going to maintain that sort of target share. So with DeAndre Hopkins, who's just dominated in target share since, over the last 5 years, with someone like him, I'm not necessarily expecting someone to step in and see this massive target share in the Houston offense. I think that the obvious go-tos as sort of the beneficiaries of him not being there would be Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller. I think that Will Fuller has a much more intriguing ceiling than Brandon Cooks does, just given the fact that when Will Fuller's healthy, we see him giving us strong wide receiver 2 numbers pretty frequently. But obviously he can't stay healthy, and that's been a really big concern. So, to me, I don't know if there's going to be a direct player that benefits from DeAndre Hopkins not being there. I think that it's just going to be spread around, which is similar to what we were just talking about with handcuffs, is that when a wide receiver gets hurt or a wide receiver leaves a team, it's not automatic that someone on that team is going to step in and see a significant share. There's going to be instances where guys step up and they're better than we expected, and as a result, they see more targets. And maybe that's the case in what we see with Brandon Cooks this year. Maybe he doesn't get concussed and there's no issues there, which would be great, right? But I think that if you're playing probability and you're betting on it, we're just going to see really flat distribution across that Texans offense. We're going to see 4 verts in that offense constantly, and just like Duke Johnson and David Johnson just staying underneath and catching passes there too. Because, David Johnson being added to that offense too, that's more of a target share that could go to the running back position. There's enough weapons there where none of those weapons necessarily have to stand out.
No, and I'm with you. Yeah, there's a lot of variability in that offense. There's a lot of guys who are good to really good. There's no one that's like DeAndre Hopkins. There's only 4 or 5 DeAndre Hopkins in the league. So it's not like, Will Fuller's good, but he's not going to get 150 targets this year.
Yeah, and I think that you can still bet on the offense. You can still throw, if you're playing in multiple leagues, especially, definitely still target a Will Fuller or a Brandon Cooks, because there's a chance that they end up seeing a higher target share than what they're projected. I'm leaning Will Fuller because I think that his ceiling is still pretty insane. But I still understand the logic behind Brandon Cooks too.
Yeah, Brandon Cooks scares me because I feel like he's 1 concussion away from being out of the league.
Yeah, people talk about the Will Fuller injury stuff, and I'm just as concerned about Brandon Cooks.
So another question we had are, who are some of your favorite targets early, mid, and then late rounds in PPR, assuming it's a 12-team league?
Yeah, I'd say early in drafts, I'm on the Miles Sanders hype train. I think that he could end up being this year's Dalvin Cook. If you look at, I made this argument last year too, so this isn't just me saying this because of the situation right now, but Doug Peterson in the running back by committee argument, I think, is a little bit flawed. I mean, there might be something to it, but if you look at his running backs historically that he's had with Philadelphia, none of them have been even close to the talent level of Miles Sanders. It's not even close. And so that's the reason I was on Sanders last year. And then we see Jordan Howard dig in, and Miles Sanders really didn't do anything until Jordan Howard was banged up and out, right? But once you see, I feel the same way to a degree with like Tyler Higbee, right? I don't think it's the same situation at all. Like, I don't think that Tyler Higbee is someone that you need to target at all. I'm just saying that once the Ferrari's out of the garage, you can't just put it back in, right? You're gonna drive that thing around. And that's how I feel with Miles Sanders, is that we saw his skill set. We saw him be a great pass catcher. Not a ton of alternatives either in that offense anymore. So he could easily be a bell cow in the offense. And then if you look at his projection, even if you're semi-conservative with Miles Sanders in his projection, that means that there's room to grow. And even if you're fairly conservative with his projection, he still comes out as like a low-end RB1, high-end RB2. So what happens if he does get more of that work? Whereas you can't say that, I feel the same way about like a Kenyon Drake. What happens if Kenyon Drake really does maintain a bell cow workload? Then all of a sudden he's a beast, right? So Miles Sanders is someone that I'm targeting in the early rounds. Middle rounds, I'm buying into our Pittsburgh boy, Deontay Johnson.
Yes, I'm preaching this.
Yeah, I really, a lot of people are into James Washington late, which is fine. You can't hate on a late dart throw. It's whatever, right? But I do think that the argument of like Washington being as effective as Deontay Johnson isn't necessarily as strong as some people are making it out to be. Deontay Johnson being a rookie last year, in a good rookie class, Deontay Johnson, with the crappy quarterbacks that were throwing in the ball, led that class in receptions last year.
It's impressive.
And I think a lot of it too is just this anchoring bias where he didn't come out as necessarily a super strong prospect in terms of modeling. You know, the fantasy community, like myself, we're very analytical and we look at prospects in a very numbers driven way, much more so than the NFL does even. And Deontay Johnson didn't come out looking great from that perspective. And so I think there's a little bit of an anchoring bias there, sort of with Terry McLaurin too. I feel like where they weren't very productive guys. Deontay Johnson had a better second to last year than last year actually. But Deontay Johnson was also competing with like pros in his offense in college. So I think there's his prospect profile wasn't as bad as some people make it out to be. And I just, I think that there's this opportunity for him to see a really high target share in that offense where he already saw 19% of the team's targets as a rookie last year. He could hit realistically that 25% mark if things evolve and things move forward. So I like Deontay Johnson a lot. In the late rounds, I guess I'll throw the one guy who's coming to my brain right now is Anthony Miller, who I liked a lot as a prospect and really hasn't been able to stay healthy as a pro yet. But we saw last year when Taylor Gabriel left he ended the season essentially, I think, like week 11 or something because of his concussion. Anthony Miller stepped in. He had 5 straight weeks he was a wide receiver 2 in fantasy. And there's a quarterback change going on there. I don't know if Nick Foles is a lock to be an upgrade over Mitch Trubisky in terms of throwing the ball. I think that's a little bit too strong of a take just because it's not like Nick Foles is special. But I think the opportunity is there, right? There's the potential for Nick Foles to be a lot better than what Mitch Trubisky was within that offense. And if that's the case, then Anthony Miller is the number 2 target there. He could really pay off where his ADP is right now.
And kind of in a way that what we keep referring to is floors and ceilings. How you were talking about, Miles Sanders, his floors really high because it's the idea of he's actually a really, really good underrated receiving back. He catches the ball extremely well along with running it. Deontay Johnson, I feel like, brings something different to Pittsburgh. If you look at their wide receivers, whether it's Claypool, Washington, Juju, Ebron, Vance McDonald, that entire crew, they're all super physical. Deontay Johnson's a good route runner. He's squirmy, he's fast. He just brings a different skill set. Yeah. And, it's interesting. So next question is, if our nightmares come true and we do not have a football season, what are we supposed to do about dynasty leagues? If we drafted already, do we do another draft next year?
It's a good question. One thing because I'm a commissioner of a couple of dynasty leagues. One of the things, so I think the big concern if you're in an established league would be what happens in the rookie draft, right? How do you handle rookie drafts if if nothing happens, nothing moves forward? We don't know what like contract situations are going to look like if there's no season. I would assume that everything just gets pushed and everyone just plays for the same, but hopefully we don't run into this problem. But one thing that I've thought about, because obviously, the way that we set rookie draft order is typically based on like reverse standings or however your league has it. There's some way to allow the bad teams to have front end picks. And I think in a season that's missed, you still want to somehow reward these bad teams. One way of doing that, in my opinion, is to find different value calculators, or you can go to like Dynasty League Football and find values for individual players, and literally tabulate and calculate the value per team based on everyone's roster. And then whoever has the lowest value gets the first pick. I haven't actually said this out loud to anyone, so maybe this doesn't make any sense.
No, I like it. I think that's a really good idea.
Maybe the worst team then gets the first pick, et cetera, et cetera. That way, like for instance, I have a team where I lost the championship last year devastatingly, and I had to blow it up. It was a really old team. I ran hot. I had a really good regular season record, but it was just not that great of a team to be able to be competitive year over year. So I wanted to be early and selling off some of these assets to rebuild really quickly, right? But my team, given the fact that I got second in that league, I would then hypothetically, if we were to just go with the same standings in our draft, I'd be picking 11th. And I don't think that's necessarily fair because I rebuilt my team completely and my team sucks now. And the whole point of it is that it does suck. Like I want it to suck almost, right? I'm tanking a little bit. And so from that standpoint, I think that if you value players in some mathematical and logical way, then you can find a solution to this without, if the season doesn't end up happening.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. I've never thought of that or heard of that. So yeah, that's some pretty cool
Yeah.
insight. Another question we have is, will Josh Allen be a top 10 quarterback over the next 4 years?
That's a great question because if you were to ask me the next two, I'd say yes. I think that you have to be a little bit concerned about him getting this next contract if he doesn't perform over the next couple of years. So I do think that he's properly ranked. So I guess I'd say yes, given what he can do with his legs, the fact that they added Stephon Diggs. But look, Josh Allen, I had major concerns with him coming into the league, and I think that he's shown that those concerns were pretty valid just from the perspective of how he throws the ball. His deep ball accuracy needs to get a little bit stronger, but I do think that what they're building, I'm sort of trusting the Bills front office a little bit because what we've seen with their moves is that they value the positions that matter in football. And they're adding pieces around Josh Allen that should help his skill set a lot. So I'll say yes, he will be a top 10 quarterback over the next 4 years.
I like that. And that brings me, it ties in nicely to my next question is, so I was talking to a buddy this morning and he said that he's been seeing like a lot of people talking about how they should change the scoring system because of quarterbacks who can run or outscoring quarterbacks who can throw. What's your thoughts on this? I hate the idea personally, because why are you punishing somebody who has Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson? I don't think it's a good idea personally, but the argument was Kyler Murray had like 600 less passing yards and like 6 less touchdowns than Matt Ryan last year, but they scored the same amount of fantasy points.
Yeah, so here's my take with any of the scoring stuff. It's like are we really trying to match and value players the identical way that they would be valued in real football? Because I think you're never going to win that battle. If you really wanted to be super super accurate with how players are scoring points, then you would tie it to some sort of like expected points model or something that would be just way more accurate than random passing yards or random rushing yards. What we're doing is we're playing a game about a game. This is just a game, and you can manipulate the game however you want to manipulate the game. I don't think that it has to match what's going on in real football. If Josh Allen is a top 15 to 20 quarterback right now, just given his arm concerns, and he's a top 8 quarterback in fantasy, I don't think it's that big of a deal. You just have to play the game and you have to adjust based on those scoring.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. That's he told me, and I was like, that's not a real thought. People aren't talking about that. Like, it's just seems irrelevant.
Yeah, I see it all the time, though. I mean, people really want fantasy to match the real game. And it's like, guys, I mean, like, it's never going to do that unless, I mean, the running back position is the most valuable in fantasy and it's the least valuable in real. Like, if you really want to change something and make these positions different, then we shouldn't even start running backs in fantasy.
I'm 100% with you, man. Somebody asked if they are in rebuilding mode for a dynasty, but they have a high-end wide receiver, example, Michael Thomas. What would it take for them to move Michael Thomas?
I usually go a guy like that. I usually think first about like 3 firsts, right? Or I try to get like an AJ Brown type as a baseline and then add some firsts to that. So that you're getting that youth and then you're also adding, some draft picks to then hit. But yeah, I mean, if you're in rebuild mode, I don't think there's any reason to hold on to a Michael Thomas necessarily, unless you think that you can turn it around in a year or so, because what you're really trying to do here is just get values that are appreciating. And the younger guys, I mean, even if they're not producing in terms of fantasy points and in terms of expected value, what you're really trying to do is just gobble up as many pieces that are going to appreciate in value over the next 1 or 2 years, so your lineup is filled with value that then you can then flip in a situation where you're like, oh, my team's good now, I can compete. Then you can flip that value, even if it's not producing to the levels of what you would need it to produce in order to win. You can still flip that value in order to get some of those studs that would be producing.
That makes sense. And we have 2 more questions before we get to rapid fire. In a standard 12-team league, would you rather, draft early like a Pat Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, or wait to grab a quarterback until late?
Definitely late. Definitely
I'm with
late.
you. I'm with you.
Yeah, would not be getting a Lamar Jackson or Mahomes at their ADP right now. I did a study on it. I mean, I've done a ton of work on drafting quarterbacks late. Obviously, it's where the
Sure.
late round QB
Sure.
handle and such comes from. But yeah, I mean, even if you look at what happens to guys who posted basically every year, that the top quarterbacks, the reason we see this like yo-yo of like top quarterbacks not performing year over year is because the guys who finish first at the quarterback position generally are doing it because they had some sort of outlier season.
Sure.
So this past year, Lamar Jackson, maybe he can maintain what he did with his legs. Maybe that can happen year over year. I'm not as bullish because I think defenses will somewhat figure it out. But maybe Lamar Jackson can do what he did with his legs year over year. But he's not going to maintain a 9% touchdown rate that he had last year. Generally speaking, guys, historically, if you look at just basic regression, he's going to be closer to a 6% touchdown rate this year, which would be 12 fewer passing touchdowns than he had last year. So there's a dramatic difference there. Patrick Mahomes is the one guy that you can maybe make the case for because I think there's a lot more stability there. But even still, just where his ADP is, it makes a lot more sense. Just wait, given the depth of the quarterback position.
That's exactly it. The depth is like, Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson are going to be 1-2 for a while, I think.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of, is it going to be that much of a difference between drafting like later on, let's just say a Josh Allen, who's probably going to be somewhere around that 10 mark? Like, is the point differential going to be huge? I don't think it's going to be big enough for me to take a quarterback with like my first or second round pick.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right. And then last one is, what should I realistically expect in return for trading Lamar Jackson?
It depends. Is this like a single quarterback dynasty league?
Yeah, single quarterback dynasty league.
See, the thing that I've noticed, it's difficult. The thing that I've noticed is you just get wildly different valuations for quarterbacks in single quarterback dynasty leagues. I mean, I'm all about trading a Lamar Jackson or Mahomes in single quarterback leagues. It's just you're not going to get the advantage that you think you're going to get. But if you look at startup ADP, they're still listed fairly high. I mean, they're still listed usually in like the 20s and 30s and such in startups. So to me, if you can get value out of that with players that are being drafted around there, I would go for it. But like I said, it's tough to find and pinpoint the guys who are who are the teams who are willing to buy into a quarterback in a single quarterback league.
Yeah, I got Lamar Jackson in my dynasty league his rookie year for like $2, but I also had Baker Mayfield. And last year, after John Ross went off the first 2 weeks, I flipped Baker and John Ross for Devontae Adams. The biggest heist ever.
My goodness. Yeah. Steal.
All right. So rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Who is leading the Jets in receiving this year?
Jamison Crowder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who is the number one pick in dynasty rookie drafts?
CEH.
Okay. I'm not sold on him. I know this is rapid fire, but like, I think he's going to be good. And I like he landed in the all-time perfect spot. I don't know like why we're guaranteeing he's going to be like, not even the workhorse, but like they still have Williams, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's more so like this year, I think you can make the argument so every single rookie running back that was drafted has some semblance of competition this year, right? Like every single one of them.
Sure.
I would argue pretty strongly that the guy in year one who has the most intriguing path to upside is Jonathan Taylor. Because Marlon Mack is a generally replaceable running back. Nyheim Hines is fine, but I think he's fine as a pass catcher, but he's not special per se. And if you look at what the Colts did last year and historically what they've done under this regime, is they're not afraid to give in single games, give running backs a hefty workload. Whereas I think that you would be a little bit more concerned about CEH with Damian Williams there and some of the other guys too, like even, Cam Akers in LA. I think there's still some concern about an RBBC. So I think Jonathan Taylor year one actually has the highest ceiling, but I think that just from a probability standpoint and the fact that there is the chance that CEH would end up being the workhorse, he still deserves to be one, in my opinion, and from a redraft standpoint and a dynasty standpoint. But yeah, I mean, I'm of the belief too that we might not see Damian there next year. So next year will be the year that the CEH then goes off.
Next one is right now, Tom Brady's ADP for quarterbacks is 11th. Will he finish in the top 10?
I have him at 10, so I guess I'll say yes. So like I feel like the bet though should be, or I should say no based on probability, but I'll just say yes. It's more fun.
That's fine. I got to ask this one for Pittsburgh. So Ben's ADP for quarterbacks is 16. Is he overrated, underrated, or properly rated?
I think he's properly rated. there's definitely the upside. I mean, we've seen it. We've seen it from Ben. We've seen him be a top 5 fantasy quarterback in the past. They're going to probably be pretty pass heavy just because of what they've done historically over the last 5 or so years. I think he's properly valued. The problem is there's just a lot of competition at quarterback. I think at the end of the year, we shouldn't be shocked if Ben's like QB 20 just because of how good the quarterback position is. But I do think that he has that opportunity to be, a fringe top 10 guy.
I think that, not to talk about the Steelers, but I think the Steelers come out in a lot more 12 personnel than
Yeah,
what we've seen in past. So
that's true.
we'll see. But buy or sell Derrick Henry as a top 5 running back?
Sell. I look. I got burned by Derrick Henry last year for sure. But I still say that the process was right in the way that we approached Derrick Henry in general, or the way that I did from a numbers driven perspective. You just cannot bank on that sort of sustainability for a guy who's not catching passes. It's just really, really tough. And now they get Darrington Evans, who's going to play that role. I just don't see the path to receiving upside for him.
I'm 100% with you. Pick 2 of these like middle tier running back: Chris Carson, Leonard Fournette, James Conner, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell.
That's a good question. I am going to go with James Conner.
Conner, and you get one more.
Oh, Chris Carson is the other one then. I'm gonna fade Lenny here. It's tough. I think you can make the case for him. But the reason I went Carson and Carson when he's healthy, I mean, he's like last year when he was healthy, he was a top 10 guy in fantasy. Connor, we've seen with top 5 upside also. I do worry a little bit about Anthony McFarland in that offense, and him stealing some receiving work. I mean, you have ties to Tomlin's son at Maryland. And to me, McFarland, we haven't seen a change of pace back like him in the Steelers offense since James Conner. Yeah, right. I mean, really, exactly. We haven't seen anyone like this with this speed in the Steelers offense. I think they maybe wanted to do this with like a Dree Archer.
Man, I thought he was going to be so good. I was so wrong on
that. Right. So like we haven't seen anything like this. I mean, because they've been drafting, they get Jalen Samuels, who's a Swiss Army knife who isn't necessarily even a running back. They get Benny Snell, who's slower than us. So there's a situation here where I am a little bit scared that Anthony McFarland takes more work than we believe from James Conner. But this is the last year that James Conner could be a Steeler. Last year of his contract. It wouldn't shock me at all if they do what they've done with running backs in the past, with Le'Veon Bell in particular, and just ride him out and just give him a ton of work. And if he sees a ton of work in that offense, we know he has top 5 upside.
Great point. David Johnson's kind of the one that I'm not sure on. I feel like he's one of those guys. Man. He's either going to boom or bust. Like there's no middle ground for David Johnson.
It's tough because last year we were all almost making fun. We as a community were almost making fun of the Carlos Hyde acquisition and how he wasn't going to mean anything in fantasy. And I mean he ran a lot better than we all expected. Yep. The offensive line still isn't great, but it's better than it was 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, I mean I wouldn't be shocked if David Johnson has a decent season. I would rather bet on youth and bet on guys who have a little bit more of the age trajectory on their side as opposed to a David Johnson or a Le'Veon Bell.
I'm with you on that one. 2 more is who will be this year's Mark Andrews?
Oh, TJ Hawkinson.
Ooh.
If he can stay healthy, there's a lot to like about Hawkinson's profile. So I did an article on finding breakout tight ends in fantasy and sort of looked at guys who have broken out historically over the last 10 years and found traits that a lot of those guys shared. So many of them were 2nd and 3rd year guys. I think 2nd in particular, actually. So many of them were 2nd year guys. A lot of them were attached to a good quarterback. A lot of them had previous production of some sort, which Hawkinson sort of has. And a lot of them were highly drafted as well, which Hawkinson has. So, and a lot of them were freak athletes. That's actually one of the big things is that so I had this sample of like 27 tight ends in this like breakout sample. And of the 27, the average height adjusted speed score, so height adjusted 40 time and weight adjusted 40 time, it ranked in the 85th percentile of these guys. So TJ Hawkinson's a freak. I mean, a lot of these guys are freaks, but if you're targeting a late round tight end, I mean, I think there's a lot of them this year. So, I think like Irv Smith could even work in this for a question like this. But guys who are drafted late, you really should be targeting the freak athletes. Those are the guys that break. I want nothing to do with Jack Doyle this year. Just give me guys who are going to actually give me that crazy upside. So TJ Hawkinson's my answer there. Hopefully he can stay healthy though.
Speaking of freak athletes, I also like Mike Gesicki.
Yeah, Mike Gesicki's a great one. Yeah. I mean, he's another one. I think there's a lot of those kinds of guys this year that you could absolutely target and sort of throw into this Mark Andrews bucket and being that guy. I'm just more so making the alignment of him being a second-year tight end.
I like Hawkinson a lot. Last one. Give me a league winner and a league loser.
Ooh, man. I'll say league loser. I'll say for the league loser, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I love him as a real player. I love this guy, but I think that not enough has been talked about regression and downside. I'm going to say Austin Eckler. And I know that a lot of people are super, super high. I recognize that there's a path to him being a top 5 running back, but I also don't think that people are recognizing everything that's changing in that offense.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what the quarterback play is going to look like. They draft Joshua Kelly, who's a bigger bodied guy who's likely going to take on some of that goal line work. Austin Eckler, we don't know what his target share is exactly going to look like. We know that historically Phillip Rivers has dumped it off a lot, and we see a high target share with his running backs. Part of that's personnel related, but part of it is Rivers related. And Eckler had crazy efficiency last year. A touchdown regression that's coming. You have a yards per target rate that's regressing. So I have some fears with Austin Eckler. So off the top of my head, that was the first guy that came to my mind. I hate saying it out loud though, because he's so good. It's just one of those things where like, you're just looking at the numbers and but he's so good that you wouldn't be shocked if he hits ADP and maintains it. League winner, I'll just go really, really deep here. Instead of, giving you like a middle round guy, I'll go like really, really late. And I'm going to say Antonio Gibson.
Ooh, I like
Mostly,
that one.
It's just straight up ambiguous backfield. We don't know who's going to emerge. We don't know if Darius Geis is going to stay healthy. And Gibson is just super, super intriguing as a prospect. He's not someone that I typically gravitate towards, but his athleticism is so out of control that it's hard to ignore it. And I hope that offense can use him in sort of interesting and creative ways.
Yep. I think that is the hope, even though everything's going wild with the Washington professional football team.
Yeah.
So, hey man, I appreciate you coming on. I had a great time. Definitely check out this guy's, Twitter, his podcast, Late Round Quarterback. Awesome stuff, man. Great content. You posted a thread of tweets last night of like all the research you've been doing. It was great information. So guys, definitely check it out. Give him a follow. And again, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. We really appreciate it here at Yards Per Fantasy. If you guys like the video, please click like, drop a sub, drop a comment what you guys thought about the video. If there's a player you guys want to see us break down, I can do a video on it. We can write an article about it. Just give us some feedback. Let us know what you guys want to see. If you guys liked me, please check out my channel, Sports Muse. I've interviewed NFL players, Levon Kirkland, Bruce Gronkowski. I've had some of the best players in the nation, Keyshawn Silver, Elliott Donald, Jake Brenningstool, players from UCLA, Clemson, Bo Collins, some players you're definitely going to see on Sundays in the near future. So definitely check it out, guys. And like I said, please drop a sub.